resolution about education was presented to the United States Senate by a bipartisan group of 22 senators. It was passed by the Senate unanimously, a major feat in itself. In celebrating this achievement, the following statement was presented, quote, "Public schools are the foundation of our democracy, where kids are put on a path toward reaching their full potential and are prepared to shape America's future. They are unifying places of opportunity where kids with different backgrounds, beliefs, and abilities come together for the common purpose of learning and getting a healthy start. Every child deserves a great education. That means we must invest in public schools," unquote. These words were uttered by Senator Jack Reed of the state of Rhode Island. It is important to note that this resolution supported efforts toward increasing equal opportunities for students of all backgrounds, which will afford every child a high-quality education, regardless of demographics or zip codes, important points that each of us here today consider in our roles as school committee members. In addition to Senator Reed's own educational successes, including West Point, Harvard University, and its law school, and his service in the United States Army, his years in Congress have had many instances in which he has educated his colleagues and the public at large about the heavy responsibilities assumed by those who promote good governance. It is really my honor to introduce Senator Jack Reed.
Well, first, let me thank Sandra for such a warm introduction. And if I was a good lawyer, I'd simply say, I rest my case and I'd leave. But if I was a good lawyer, I'd be practicing law. That's that simple. I also want to thank Paul and all the members of the Rhode Island Association of School Committees for giving me a chance to speak today. And also let me join you in welcoming the National School Board Association President, David Sheehan, to Rhode Island. He is here or will be coming. He'll be coming. Well, thank you all for what you do. Strengthen public education. It is the lifeblood of our democracy. I will divert a moment and say, when Ben Bernanke came in to interview for the position as chairman of the Federal Reserve Board, we were talking and I said, well, you're fully prepared for this. You've had the most challenging job in America. And he looked at me like, yeah, you were president of the Princeton, New Jersey School Board. Everything else is easy. And Ben's not a funny guy, so he kind of nodded. That was it. Well, the problem is today, public education is under threat. The Trump administration's assault on public education could all set us back. We're on a path towards building a knowledge economy. We were on that path. We were introducing cutting-edge technologies because young people were well educated, prepared for college. Our colleges had the resource to invest in this. This knowledge economy, though, is slipping through our hands. And in fact, I think deliberately, quite deliberately, the president is trying to build an ignorance economy, slashing research for universities, trying to eliminate the Department of Education, gutting funding for public schools, squelching freedom of speech and inquiry in so many different dimensions, erasing and whitewashing our history, and threatening federal funding for any entity that does not adhere to his positions. And he's also done significant damage, I would argue. He slashed staffing at the Department of Education, including closing the regional office that supports Rhode Island. So we no longer have a place that's close at hand to look to advice and support. He's gutted educational research, including the regional educational laboratories that have been helping Rhode Island address critical needs like the educator pipeline. He's the recipient of millions of dollars in grants to Rhode Island that support school-based mental health, teacher and school leader development, and farm-to-school programs for healthier school meals. And he's threatened all federal funding for schools who do not comply with the administration's legally dubious interpretations of civil rights laws. Fortunately, Rhode and the Rhode Island Attorney General, Peter Arona, are on the case and fighting these actions in court. But adding to the chaos, yesterday the administration released its so-called skinny budget, which is a starvation budget for education. Overall, the president proposes to cut over 15% from the Department of Education, including over $4.5 billion that support K through 12 education. He also proposes to eliminate funding for multilingual language learners, which would reduce resources in Rhode Island by roughly $3 million. He would eliminate Gear Up, which helps Rhode Island students prepare for success in college. Last year, Rhode Island was awarded a 7-year, $33.6 million Gear Up grant, which is in danger of being unfunded or removed. Overall, if you're forced to make up for that, you're going to have a very challenging time, and I'm being polite. The president cannot eliminate the Department of Education without congressional action, but he can propose budget cuts, but it is Congress that has the power of the purse. We can react, and let me tell you, just yesterday, Susan Collins, the Republican chairwoman of the Appropriations Committee and a very outstanding public servant, said she is very much in disagreement with this budget. Roger Wicker, the chairman of the Armed Services Committee, and Mitch McConnell object to the defense spending parts, but we're finally seeing some Republicans stand up and say, this is not the path we should follow. But it's so important for you and your colleagues, particularly your colleagues in what are red, purple, whatever you want to call the states, to stand up and say, listen, this is fundamental to our success as a nation in every capacity. For example, we have difficulties recruiting military personnel. 2 significant reasons. 1, obesity. 2, they can't pass a relatively simple mental test. Is that a failure of our military? No. It's a failure of our public health system and, to a degree, our education system. We've got to do better. But instead of slashing the Department of Education, we have to do more, I think, to invest in IDEA programs and Title I programs. And I've sponsored legislation that would put us on a path to fully funding these programs. We also need, I believe, to invest in our school infrastructure. I'm sure if you go around your community, there is a couple of buildings that you kind of gulp when you walk in, knowing that young children are there. We'll introduce very shortly the Rebuild America School Act, which calls for $130 billion in federal investment to support school modernization so that our students have the safe, warm, and up-to-date facilities they need. And you know this because either in your town, you've got a new school facility that is just state-of-the-art, the whiteboards, the computers, everything. But you have 2 or 3 buildings that were built around 1935. You want to get everyone up to that level of technological expertise because the world is evolving so quickly when it comes to these technicalities or technical approaches, a better word for it, AI, quantum computing. I was just in Providence College last weekend. We dedicated their new Ben Mondor nursing education building. It's incredible. They have a whole area that looks just like a hospital. They have robotic dummies that are powered by AI, so they can actually talk to you and you can talk to them. And eventually, they'll be so powerful, they'll be saying, gee, I don't like that dress you're wearing, and you want you to come back. No, this is how it's moving so fast. And if we don't have these technical facilities, our children will be behind, won't they? And also, we need to protect Medicaid, which in addition to being essential to maintaining health for so many people in Rhode Island, it's the 4th largest source of federal funding for our schools. I don't know if you realize that. I didn't. Rhode Island schools receive nearly $32 million in Medicaid funding each year. And the push for this big, big tax cut is driving them painfully, and they'll admit it, to making significant cuts in Medicaid. And we can't do that. We can't trade tax cuts for essential services in your schools, in community health care centers. Oh, and by the way, most of the nursing homes in Rhode Island depend upon Medicaid just to keep the doors open. And if it goes away significantly, you'll start seeing lots of beds disappearing for health care for seniors and others. They're also looking to fund school vouchers, which is a perennial. And frankly, it's a zero-sum game. More money for vouchers, less money for public schools. And we need more money for public schools. And finally, as you probably know, public education is on the docket at the Supreme Court as we speak. The court has heard arguments on a case that could require schools to offer opt-out options to parents for a wide range of curricular or other instructional programs based on religious beliefs. On Wednesday, the court heard arguments about a case that would require the authorization of religious charter schools. In a state founded by Roger Williams, dedicated to the principle of freedom of conscience, we should be quite concerned about the direction this is heading. Now is the time to recommit ourselves, all of us, to public education. It's always been recognized as the strength of this nation. In fact, one of my thoughts, I worked closely with Claiborne Pell, who did so much in education. And I think what really turned him on was, to his great credit, in World War II, he joined the Coast Guard, not as a admiral's aide, but as a cook in the bottom of that vessel, going across the Atlantic on runs of ammunition and supplies to Great Britain. And I think there he sensed, my God, these other guys are pretty smart. They didn't go to Princeton, they didn't do this, but they got out of a good public school in New York or Boston or Providence, high school, maybe not even high school. There's real potential here. Let's develop it. And as a result, the Pell Grants. That's my theoretical insights. You're on the front lines. You're also fighting not just for schools, you're fighting for one of the most democratic institutions in your community, a public school that welcomes everyone to come in, to learn, to thrive, and to go on and contribute. So I stand with you in your support of public education. We are going to work all we can to ensure that you have the resources. They're not diverted, they're not held up, they're delivered to our schools. And if we're successful in doing that, the proof will not be this year or next year. It'll be years from now when graduates of public education are making the great discoveries in science, are leading our military forces, are devoting themselves to public service, all those things, which really is the essence of this country. Your service makes a real difference. Thank you very much. Thank you.